Now, for this particular part of the course, I'd like you to cast your mind back to the earlier modules when we were talking about the superheroes and also the romantic stories. We saw that they were repetitive. So why then do people like stories that are repetitive and they pretty much know what the ending's going to be even before they're listening to it or watching it? What makes it intriguing for them? Why? And it comes down to hormones. Here you'll see there's dopamine, cortisol and oxytocin. We're actually going to be looking at endorphins as well. So cortisol is actually a hormone that is produced to reduce our anxiety. So for example, when you become anxious, your body naturally produces more cortisol. In fact, people suffering from anxiety will go to the doctor and the doctor will prescribe them with medicine, which is cortisol. So that will reduce their anxiety. The story that we looked at with regards to the life insurance financial planner, that is actually all about cortisol and anxiety. And it's a hormone in us that drives us to take action, just like we saw in the last module. Now what we're actually going to be looking at is dopamine. Now dopamine is extremely powerful when it comes to storytelling. We'll look at the practical uses of it and how you can actually incorporate it into your stories, but first I want you to understand what it is. Now the best way I can explain it to you is by looking at addictions. So for example, people who gamble, like slot machines, one-arm bandit machines, you know, where you pull the lever and then you've got 3 or 5 fruits on the machine and they have apples, pears, pineapples, and then they all spin, and then if you get 3 pineapples then you win some money. That is a dopamine effect. Now, social media actually uses it as well. You know, when you send a message or a moment update on your Facebook profile, for example, or your WeChat moments, then you are waiting, aren't you? Who likes it? Who likes what I just posted? You know, you probably posted some fantastic pictures of your day, or you've made a comment on somebody else's post, and you're thinking, wow, when are people going to like what I said? Then you put your phone in your pocket, and suddenly you feel it vibrate, or it starts beeping. That is the dopamine effect. What you're feeling right at that second is the dopamine effect. Just as you're pulling your phone out of your pocket to see if people liked what you wrote, what you said, that is dopamine. Now maybe you pick it out of your pocket and all it is a bit of advertising, and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, I was hoping that was going to be someone liking what I commented. Or maybe they do. Maybe they think, wow, yeah, you get a like, you get a thumbs up. That is the dopamine effect. And by finding ways to introduce a dopamine effect to our stories makes them 10 times, 100 times even more powerful. And also oxytocin. Now oxytocin is the hormone that builds empathy. So when we were talking about the romantic movies before, these are all about oxytocin, building empathy, building sympathy even in some respects. But what it actually does is it creates a connection between the storyteller and the receiver of that story. And then endorphins, which is pretty much the happiness drug, the thing that makes us laugh, the thing that makes us feel happy. Even chocolate for some people makes them feel happy, or sports. In stories, it's all about making people laugh. So looking at dopamine first, this is the chemical formula for it, but the effects of dopamine make people focus on what's being said. It drives motivation, and it also drives memory and memory recall. How to introduce this into a story is to create a cliffhanger or a suspense. Now, to give an example of this, all we have to do is look back at the superhero example, and there is always a cliffhanger, which is usually at the end, or when the superhero, for example, has no way to save the Earth until he comes up with his great idea. And there's also a deal of suspense in there too. And this can be seen in many science fiction stories, and also more commonly seen in crime or thriller stories, books and movies. Within your story, when you're trying to drive motivation to your audience, if you could integrate suspense and a cliffhanger of some form into your story, it's going to keep people interested and wanting to know more. They're going to be hanging on your every word, creating their own stories in their own heads about what could potentially happen, and waiting for confirmation from you as the storyteller of what is actually going to be happening. Or the result, the final result. Oxytocin again the chemical formula, and the effects of oxytocin, the hormone, is to build empathy, trust, generosity and bonding. So for example, if we look back to Mr. Zhao at the very beginning with the advertising slide that we looked at, this is driving our oxytocin hormones. This is making us like Mr. Zhao for everything he's done. This is building trust with Mr. Zhao because of how great his apples are, the amount of time he's been doing it, and also because of the succulent juiciness inside. So you actually bond with Mr. Zhao, even though you don't know who Mr. Zhao is. That is the effect of oxytocin. And again, building this into a story is extremely powerful. And actually a very simple way of doing this is by relaying a story from your past. A true story. Now if we look at Forrest Gump, or it doesn't have to be Forrest Gump, I mean obviously that was a completely made up story, but some people actually Googled, is everything that happened to Forrest Gump true? Even though it was the craziest story imaginable. But people actually believed that it was true because he seemed like such a down-to-earth, normal guy, and it just random events were happening to him. People thought it was true. Now, to build empathy, people like to hear a true story. So when motivating people in business, it's good to give an example as a story. Maybe you talk about competitors, previous experiences, previous positions, previous projects, and how they panned out. Use it how you want to. You can, again, as I said, we're going to look at the 7 story structures, which will help you to structure your story depending on what effect you want to have. But bear in mind that people like personal experience because it builds the levels of oxytocin and makes it more personal. They build empathy and they'll build a bond with you. Endorphin, the effects that it has, again, there's the chemical formula. They relieve stress and pain, trigger a happy and peaceful feeling. Now, this is what we all like. If you can make your story funny, now I'm not saying it should be comedy, I'm not saying that you should be just cracking jokes, but if you can make people empathize with your story and make them laugh, you're onto a winner. And this is why, for example, with the superhero example, and also the romantic comedy, there is always an element of endorphin there, which makes people laugh, which makes people really empathize with the story itself. So we're coming to the crucial parts now. We're going to be looking a little bit at empathy, and then we're going to be focusing on 7 essential story structures so that you can do them yourselves and practice them yourselves, using them as you wish. And everything that we've been looking at through these past modules, putting it together in a way that will help you to be able to deliver powerful, hard-hitting and motivational stories. See you in the next module.